Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Practical Pet Business. Lorin, you and I were recently at one of the industry's largest pet shows. Lots of different things going on there. A lot of retailers, a lot of companies, a lot of education. We had the grooming folks. Really a wide range and a wide swath of things business related going on. And this is something you and I have been going to for a long time. How was this year as opposed to other years? What things stood out to you? And from the scope of the retailers in particular, what would have stood out for someone who hasn't been there maybe in a couple of years?
Um, I feel like the show is a little bit indicative of the economy currently. Um, it, I know what was touted as far as attendance and everything, but it felt slower. Um, it felt like it was not as well attended as normal. Um, and I've gone for, almost 25 years, except for when it was closed a few years ago. Um, I didn't see a lot of necessarily new innovations. There were a few things here and there. But I like the layout. The layout was different this year. Grooming was in a different section. Um, the emerging brands and the new product showcase was all good. Um, there were a few areas that felt like the flow wasn't, really, I don't know, the feng shui wasn't good. Um, but, and that was just in the middle, but that's difficult to do too. I get that. But the feedback was really interesting. Um, I mean, let's face it, retailers talk to retailers, brands talk to brands. And it was really interesting to talk to brands who were there exhibiting and get their feedback about this particular show. And especially because some of them who go to every show, they exhibit at every show, including international, are starting to question their ROI. Is it really worth it? But the overwhelming, prevailing, panicky statement was because I asked, I said, well, what would happen if you didn't come to the show one year? Oh, people would think something was wrong. They would think we're closing. They would think, something the company wasn't doing well or something like that. They forget about us. And that to me is kind of short-sighted to how else you could promote your company during the same time frame and the kind of specials and deals you could offer. I had one brand tell me that they could literally do an end cap in every single store for free and still come out ahead.
Wow.
And that's a huge statement there. So I said, so, how will you measure your ROI? Because he said, we may not see the ROI for a few months. Maybe somebody's not buying at the show, but we'll hear about it a few months later when they say, oh yeah, I saw you at whatever trade show. And so they're following back up. So it's a tough thing to measure. So a lot of it goes by feel, and I can always tell when I'm going through the show and walking the show and working the show that whether the feel is oh my gosh, this is amazing and everybody's super excited, or the feel is a little reserved. And again, I don't think that's indicative of the show itself. I just think that's indicative of the economy where people are a little bit nervous. Retailers are a little nervous, they're wary, they're cautious, they're still spending money, but they're really taking the time to think about where that money is going. I did have some retailers say, I did spend more than I intended to. And I was like, that's the story of my life. I've never been to one of those shows that I didn't spend more than I intended to. Um, but but it's interesting too, because without a lot of innovation, brand new, not line expansion, but innovation. It's not really an indicator that you're going to spend more than you intend.
Right, right. I think you just hit on something key for me as I was at the show was innovation, not brand expansion. Um, I saw brand expansion everywhere. I mean, there was just a plethora, almost too much to the point where I just felt nobody was really standing out, especially in the areas. I actually thought in some cases it was a negative because they were a brand that I would look at for a specific, section or sector. And now they had expanded into so many other things. I felt if you were just discovering them, you would not have the same appreciation that they were experts in this one area because now they were talking about four or five different areas that they have, migrated into, white labeled themselves into, etc. And I kind of felt bad for them. And the other thing I saw a lot of was a whole ton of rebranding and changing of
Mhm.
logos, changing of labels, changing the persona that was them to the point where there were times where I literally was like looking and you'd have one booth end, the next booth start. And if you weren't looking close, you could see that, oh, that might be just another expansion of what they're doing because
Mhm.
everybody's just seemingly going to this specific type of look and feel. And,
Right.
I actually questioned a couple of the folks, and what they said was, we have to because our stores are telling us that we stand out in the wrong way. And I was like, but do you? Because I know your products, I have your products,
Hmm.
and I'm looking at this, and it's just, there's just not a lot of info here, and there's no personality. I mean, the personality in things is just gone. And so I was like, so no info, no personality. It just looks like everything else. So how are
But
you
that's
standing
going on
out?
right now. That's going on
Yeah.
right now
Oh
in the
no,
world,
that's hot. Yeah.
and what's interesting is I read an article this morning that when you look at those major corporations that have rebranded, you look at who they were when they started and what their brand looks now, it's a very generic type of branding that almost everybody is going to.
Yeah.
It's just very blah. And I don't know. What happened to, well, our stores are telling us, that we need to change because if there's a conversation going on, I mean, what happened to there's no such thing as bad press? That's obviously not true in today's world,
Sure.
but if they're talking about you when they probably weren't before. You were
Yeah.
just, they knew you, they recognized the brand, they moved on. But when they're talking about you and talking about your logo or that kind of thing, I've seen a lot of rebranding that I did not think was for the better.
Right. Right. And it's interesting because some of these folks were going through their third rebrand in five
Hmm.
years. And
So
I was like,
expensive.
yeah, and I was like, but what was wrong with the last two? And how is this the right one? And nobody could give me any. They're like, this is what the experts tell us. And I immediately go to your feeling on experts. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is where, Lorin and I are in sync here because the experts, they may have missed what, made you unique and special. Um, and I just think there's something about standing out and I just looked at so much of it as I walked and this show was huge. It was huge and there were so many products. It's not that there's a lack of products. I mean, we saw
Oh no,
expansion,
there's a lot. Yeah.
yeah, across the board. And I know when I ran into you, I said, I wish I could tell you I've seen a lot of cool innovation. I've seen new categories. I've seen things that make me really excited to share with folks that they should have this in their stores or as a manufacturer, hey, they should be looking into this. And I just didn't have any of that. There was very little. In fact, I actually felt concerned for many of the manufacturers and vendors there that they had overreached by kind of almost, well, we've got to be everything to everybody
Right.
instead of, no, we're going to be the experts in this. And if the product doesn't directly tie in and is enhanced by what we do, we're not going to expand into it. And that's that critical thing. And you and I have talked about this so many times when we talk about white labeling. I love white labeling when you can take what you do, what you're great at,
Hmm.
add it to something else to elevate that. Otherwise, anybody can white label this product. Because if all you're doing is just slapping your name on it, okay, but you're diluting
Well,
your.
they're banking on the reputation of their name,
Right,
and they know that people are going to say, "Oh, I already give that or I buy that brand." So now they've got this, and it's like, so I mean, just as an example, so you didn't buy freeze-dried beef for any other brand because this is the only brand
right,
you buy? I mean, that's not the case. That's not how we are as consumers. We're like, "Oh, well, my kid likes freeze-dried beef. What's in it? Freeze-dried beef, and it's like, okay, and where is it? Sourced and made in the United States. All right, I'll give that a try because, it's a single ingredient product and yeah, putting the name on it may be beneficial, but how much of a return is that going to be? And I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. It's just for the investment of going to a trade show and just expanding but not innovating. I don't know that that's a call out. Now, having said that, you and I talked about before, the one area that I really look forward to that is in food,
mhm,
specifically, and specifically medical type diets, veterinary type diets that are better made than what we've seen, in the past that are available in a retailer store over the counter. That's
right.
amazing. That's mind-blowing. I love that because that's a necessary thing that really hasn't been there except in bits and pieces with, Band-Aid type foods, for upset tummies or whatever. These are full-on address medical issues type food. So I love that. Um, anytime that they can vary formulas and recipes, that's a great thing to do. But outside of that, I mean, leashes and collars, you're talking about different designs, they all start to blur together. Um,
I did not see a lot of innovation
mm-mm,
in those types of things. That's what I'm looking for because we're always going to see more of those, right? But
right.
what's your new? We've all got 10, 15 leashes and collars.
Hmm.
Uh, I was, tech is always big as well. And
There was
well,
more tech this year.
yeah,
Yeah.
while I saw more tech, did not see tech that wowed me like it had in previous years, where I was like, "Oh, that's
Hmm.
cool. That that is a great move." I
Right.
just saw I saw tech, and I was like, "I get it. I'm not sure I'm moved to." And honestly, things were more expensive too. When I was asking
Oof.
what the retail pricing on certain things was, I was just kind of sitting there going, well, okay, you got maybe a good idea and a good product, but boy, your pricing is really going to put the pressure on how important that is. And can a pet parent prioritize that spend over
Right.
other necessities? And so that's where the tech kind of not, I don't want to say it missed the mark for me this year, but it didn't wow me like it had in years past, where I would see tech that really solved, like when you were talking about things that were specific to medical conditions. In previous years, I felt there was new things coming out that really excited me in that area. Didn't see so much of it this year in that area. The tech seemed to be in other avenues, and
Hmm.
convenience is always cool, but how much are you going to pay for improved convenience? And that's
Right.
that where the rubber hits the road type thing of like, I love this idea. I love this concept. I must have said that to probably, 7, 8 different vendors where I was like, I love where your head's at, but I'm not sure that the pricing is going to land with those folks because they're already doing something to address this, and that's a huge financial leap. So
Right.
I'm going to look at that. And in many cases, with the tech, it's not just buy the tech and you're done. It's buy the tech and you've got other costs associated with it.
Hmm.
And that's what kind of throws me off. And, I saw that even in some of the foods, it's like, oh,
Right.
yeah, here's this. And then we recommend, this for this area and that for that. And I'm like, and so like now we're in the deconstruction stage of things. Like it
Right.
had me interested, but now I got to add seven things. I'm already doing that. You didn't make my life any easier. And when I add all this up, I'm spending more than I
A
would.
fortune.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's just doesn't,
Well, you and I got together and talked after the show too. And, it's interesting that one of the things that we talked about, and I thought about it a little bit afterwards, to come to a show with a product that is great in theory, but is going to pop onto the marketplace at such a cost that it's detrimental to the future of the product because the retail price, the wholesale cost, all of that is problematic. By the time you catch up to where that's no longer an issue, there are 15 people who are copying you and doing it cheaper,
yeah.
faster, getting it to market in a different format, and they've just copied your idea. And you really have to plan ahead now. You just can't pop into the marketplace and go, well, in a few years when the tariffs have stopped or whatever is stopped, which never is going to stop by the looks of things, any of the price increases in general. Because remember after we were shut down for a year, everything was supposed to go back to normal and it never did. Um, so I
It did.
look
It's
at,
just called the new normal.
I
So
know
the new normal
the new
never goes.
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there'll
Just
be another new normal. And it's just more money, money, money. Pretty soon
yeah.
you're just going to walk into stores and people are just going to scan you as you walk by and take all the money out of your credit cards and wallet and all that. Um, it's really outrageous. And I think that if you can't come to market just because somebody else is doing it and you see it and go, well, we could do that and we could put our name on it, doesn't mean that they're doing well or that
Right.
there's room for another five or six companies to do that because it's cannibalization of that customer and then nobody does well. And it's just, all the way around, it's like, I have to ultimately sell this in a highly competitive market to an ever discerning customer who is cost conscious because they're still trying to feed their own families, their human families, never mind their animal families. And it's like, yeah, you need to consider all of that because it may not be the time. It may not be now. And don't tip your hand and go to market because the minute you do have something innovative and the minute somebody sees it, you're done.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that I did like that I saw at this trade show was that emerging brands, these mini booths, if you will, they weren't even booths, they were just like pop-ups. And I really enjoyed that section. And I kept thinking to myself, as I was walking after I discovered that section, there were so many brands who had these big booths, and I was like, you should have been over there if you could have been.
Hmm.
Because the ROI just made me go, because I'd see in the emerging brands, and to your point, it's like, well, here's the new folks, and then here's folks that were there last year, and they're in these big booths, and there's just not enough traffic and difference in what I'm seeing.
Right.
You're compounding, your pressures now. Um, I think that was the other thing too, where I just saw so many folks that were were just also missing with the booth presentations and the
Yeah,
interactions that were
that's
going
hard.
on. It was breaking my heart because it's not cheap. And in years past, I certainly walked away with more things that I was excited about, more things that I couldn't wait to share across the board, whether it was to pet parents, whether it was to pet retailers or other vendors and manufacturers of like, these are cool innovations. These are cool new categories that are emerging. I didn't walk away from this one feeling much of that, to be
Right.
honest. It was it's kind of surprising to me. And I walked another, point that you make on this is I walked that new product showcase, which
Hmm.
typically I love. That's, if that's the only thing I can hit,
Sure.
I make sure I prioritize and hit that. And this year it was less about innovation and it was more about, well, we've
Expansion.
expanded.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've expanded our product line. So yes, it was new for that particular company, but it was not a new category innovation. It was not a innovation on something that we hadn't seen before. It was just, oh, well, now so and so is also doing that. And so are seven others in the new.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, that just doesn't, like, there just was not a lot of innovation that
But
grabbed me.
it, but again, I think that that is how can you innovate? Even if you have a great idea, how do you innovate when your hands are tied for where you can get things made and created and um, I mean, it's expensive to have things made in the US. A lot of end user consumers won't pay the price for USA made. So that means brands have to go out of the country. And if their hands are tied going out of the country, it's a waiting period, which also, I know you love emerging brands and I love it too, but I look at emerging brands as this little pool
Mhm.
of raw meat that the piranha come to
Oh,
and look and see what they have because by the time they can get a big booth and afford all that, somebody somewhere else is going to see if they can put it together cheaper,
yeah.
faster,
I think where I liked it was that, to me, though, there wasn't any of those brands that were in that section that should have shot for the bigger booths. And I like that they had that option. I give credit to the
Sure.
organization who put it on, because that, to me, that was a good innovation that was reading the market and saying, we'd really like to get a spotlight on some of these folks who want to be here but can't dive fully into that investment. And I like that. I don't know. It's going to be interesting because I did, connect with a number of those folks. So I'll be tracking and wanting to see what they feel, 4 months from now, 6 months from now. Was it really worth it? I think we'll see that too, and whether they'll be back in a big booth next year, as opposed to, hey, can we still stay in that emerging side of things? Um, but yeah, it was unique. I mean, I want to say, um, to everybody out there, the criticisms I've heard, completely understand. Um, whether I agree or not doesn't matter. Those were your experiences and all the rest of that. Um, but I can understand what you were conveying out and the frustrations and the feelings and the concern. I mean, that's really what I took from a lot of it. I really felt the energy at the show was more frenetic and concerned than I've
Hmm.
seen even in the pandemic years.
Right.
And I just felt like it was just not that, um the energy was different for me. And I'm a big energy guy, and so I feel that
Yeah.
probably more than most do. But as I talked to the different folks, it was certainly pretty evident there is a stress that they are all under. And for many of them, I really, saw that in what they were expanding into beyond the things that most of us customers were going to them for. And it really wasn't a add-on. You said, well, how do you innovate something that you're white labeling? And again, I just go back to, you're correct, there are many things you can't because you're beholden to that. But why are you doing that then? But if you can marry what you were an expert in with what you're white labeling with, that's the opportunity for the innovation that I love in white labeling. And I love seeing those product expansions. When it's just, we've got the same product that 18 other booths have with our logo on it, I
Hmm.
just, and you and I see it just from the standpoint of, hey, now when one brand has a recall, you get lumped in with that.
Right.
And, we had a couple of those things happen right after the show. So I was like, oh, okay.
Well, the worst thing that I can say about it is the sticker shock of what it costs to just get through every single day in terms of snack bar. Two bottles of water and two bananas does not cost $38. I mean, I lived in Japan and it wasn't that bad. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
$38, two bottles of water and two bananas, not even organic bananas, just two bananas. And I was like,
No, they
oh
had the
my
organic.
God.
That was just triple the price instead of
Oh
single.
my God.
Uh,
And it was so funny because when I'm over by the cashier, because I didn't see any prices, so I got two bottles of water and two bananas. And I go to check out and the guy at the snack bar goes, so you want to pay $8 for a banana? I was like, no. I said, are we negotiating? And he started to laugh. He goes, no. I said, so you're just telling me it's $8 for one banana? I was like, oh my God. And he goes,
yeah.
yeah. And I was like, well, nothing else looks good. It's like, okay, I guess I'll take two bottles of water. $38. Come on.
Yeah, you know what? And I think you've just given some vendor out there a great idea for next year. If you're going to have that big booth. By the way, that was the only way I had drinks at the show, whether it was water, juice, or anything else, was if one of the booths that I was going and visiting had that available to me for that
Right.
exact reason. It was gaudy. That was outlandish, and
And
I
that's
think
not the show. That's the
no,
hotel
no, no,
and
no.
it
Yeah, that's
happens
not
to be that
yeah.
particular city currently, where it's like you must be joking. I mean, no matter what you got, it was ridiculous. Anywhere you
Oh,
went to eat,
yeah.
anything, it was shocking. It was shocking the pricing on it.
You would have
So
discussion.
I'm still not
Uh,
over it. Can you tell?
yeah, exactly. That's why a bag of beef jerky was a bargain for me.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
no, I will tell you all. Listen, we still love the shows.
Oh my gosh. So exciting. Always.
But as a business, we've all got to really dive deeper in challenging times, and this is just one of those areas that Lauren and I talked about. Is for those that it works for, it's obviously a tremendous opportunity. For those that it doesn't, we just heard and felt from some folks that if this doesn't work, I am really at risk. And I think that's the thing that, I'll end on is just really do your homework, really make a decision. Do you need to be at all of them? Do you need to be at one of them? Do you need to be at none of them and pivot your strategy? I don't know, but I do know the cost, the resources, the lack of innovation, the lack of new retailers. That was something else that I heard a lot about.
Yes.
All of those things factor in as you're deciding where are you going to go, where are you going to put your money in, and hopefully we've shared with you, some insights here. We appreciate you so much. Love to hear what you all are thinking. If you attended, what were some of the things that you saw, that you loved, that you experienced, some concerns you had, and we're happy to share those out. Practicalpetchat@gmail.com. You can reach us on all our social media networks and as well as our website. So thank you all. This one went a little bit long, but it was a really big, important show. And that's why we took a few extra minutes with you this week. Thanks for joining us here on Practical Pet Business.
Thanks, guys.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.